What if the key to freedom was hidden in something no one thought to question? 400 years ago, the braids on a person's head weren't just for beauty. They were messages, secrets, even escape routes, hidden in plain sight. During the Atlantic slave trade, enslaved Africans were stripped of almost everything. Their names, their homes, their languages. But they found a way to hold on to something powerful. They turned their hair into a tool of survival. In this video, you'll discover how braids carried more than style. They carried seeds literally, hidden grains that would one day grow into food. They carried messages, coded patterns that only a few could understand. And in some cases, they carried maps, paths to freedom woven carefully into every line and curve. This is not just a story about hair. It's a story about intelligence, about resistance, about people who refused to be broken and instead used what they had to fight back in ways no one expected. Because even in the darkest times, freedom found a way to grow. History is often written in books, carved in stone, or painted on canvas. But for the millions of souls caught in the gears of the Atlantic slave trade, history had to be carried in a way that could not be confiscated. So they carried it on their very bodies. Imagine, for a moment, the Middle Passage. A place of absolute theft. People were stolen from their homes, stripped of their names, and separated from their languages. They were thrown into a world where everything familiar was taken away. What remained was a void, an attempt to erase identity itself. And yet, the human spirit has always found ways to survive. Even in the darkest conditions, it adapts, it evolves, it creates. In the suffocating holds of ships, and later under the harsh sun of Caribbean and American plantations, a silent art was born, an art that required no paper, no ink, and no permission. At a time when colonizers looked at African hair and saw something they considered unkempt or unappealing, the enslaved saw something entirely different. They saw opportunity. They saw strategy. They saw a way forward. This is the story of how something as simple as braiding became a tool of resistance, a carrier of culture, and a weapon of survival. Let us travel back to the 17th century, to the rugged shores of Colombia. Here, we encounter a man whose name would become legend, Bencos Bios. To the Spanish, he was a runaway slave. To his people, he was a king. Bencos Bio understood something fundamental about freedom. Freedom is not just about strength. It is about information. Without information, there is no direction. Without direction, there is no escape. Within enslaved communities, women began to braid hair with intention, not just as a form of cultural expression, but as a method of communication. To the untrained eye, these were simply intricate hairstyles. But to those who understood, they were filled with meaning. A braid curved into an S shape could indicate the presence of a nearby river, not just any river, but one that could be crossed safely. Tightly woven zigzag patterns could signal danger. They warned of paths heavily guarded by slave hunters and their dogs. There were even styles, designed to guide people toward freedom. One such style was known among the enslaved as a departing pattern. These braids began at the forehead and extended toward the back of the head. But they were not straight. They contained deliberate breaks and offshoots. Those small deviations were not mistakes. They represented hidden paths, routes leading to palenques, fortified communities of free black people hidden deep in forests and mountains. Beyond the reach of colonial power, even the smallest details held meaning. A knot at the end of a braid was not just decorative. It was a unit of measurement. One knot could represent a certain distance. Multiple knots could indicate days of travel, guiding a person step by step toward freedom. In the silence of the plantations, where speech was monitored and punished, a person's head became a map, a guide that could not easily be taken away. But a map alone is not enough. Reaching freedom is one challenge. Surviving it is another, and this is where another layer of brilliance reveals itself. Before many women were forced onto slave ships, they sensed that they might never return home, so they prepared in the only way they could. They carried life with them, seeds, grains of African rice. Millet, beans, okra. These were carefully hidden within their hair, woven into braids, protected as best as possible. During the brutal journey across the ocean, when they arrived in the Americas, they entered a land where food was controlled and often insufficient. When enslaved people escaped into the mountains of Jamaica, the swamps of the American South, or the forests of South America, they did not arrive empty-handed. They brought their knowledge, and they brought their crops. They planted what they had carried. Rice fields began to grow in hidden clearings. Okra and beans took root in unfamiliar soil. Communities began to form around these crops, sustaining themselves independently. These were not just gardens. They were acts of resistance. Each harvest was proof that survival was possible outside the system designed to control them. Each plant was a connection to a homeland they had been forced to leave behind. Hair also served another purpose. It preserved memory. In a world where identities were being erased, where names were changed and languages were suppressed, the act of braiding became a form of cultural transmission. Women used bright fabrics, intricate wrapping techniques, and bold styles to transform it into something powerful. And beneath those wraps, the traditions continued. The braids remained. The knowledge endured. In other parts of the Americas, hair served yet another purpose. In the gold mines of Brazil, enslaved workers developed a way to hide small flecks of gold within their hair. Because their hair was often viewed with prejudice and dismissed as unimportant, it was rarely searched thoroughly. Over time, these small amounts of gold were collected. Communities pooled these hidden resources together, not for wealth in the traditional sense, but for freedom. The gold was used to purchase manumission, the legal process of buying one's freedom. It also helped build independent communities, such as Quilombo dos Palmares, a powerful society that grew into one of the largest settlements of free black people in the Americas, a nation built from resilience, a society built from what had been hidden. Today, when we look at braids, cornrows, or twists, we are not simply looking at a hairstyle. We are looking at history. We are looking at innovation born under pressure. We are looking at resistance expressed through culture. We are looking at survival. The Atlantic slave trade attempted to reduce human beings to objects. But objects do not create maps. Objects do not carry seeds across oceans. Objects do not preserve identity across generations. Every braid carried meaning. Every knot carried direction. Every seed carried hope. And sometimes, the most powerful form of resistance is not loud. It is quiet. It is deliberate. It is patient. It is found in the steady hands of a mother, braiding the way home into the hair of her child, so that even if everything else is taken, the path back to identity is never truly lost.